analyzing our capacity, the better. So the more we continue to look at and try and figure out our own capacity ourselves and not bring in other people, that's when I think our ego gets in the way. And ego not being good or bad, like I've said before, ego is not the enemy. It's just the fact of a strong ego can be humble.
Mm-hmm.
And a strong ego that is humble can be at the point of bringing in people from the outside to analyze and give feedback
Mm-hmm.
and identify blind spots and identify and analyze blood work, right? There's a certain amount of vulnerability that comes from a humility perspective where you say to yourself, it needs a strong ego to be humble to sometimes get the training you need to develop the skill to fulfill your potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you say, well, you know what, I'm not, what do I need to do to maximize my physicality? What do I need to do to maximize my intellectual, capability? And in order to do that, I need to be humble to seek the training to develop the skill. And that then goes back into the coaching side of things where we talked about coaching and we talked about training being two separate things. They can be two different things. And that's why I think it should be personal coaches, from the physicality side of things, because that's the idea. The idea is that you coach them through versus train them how to do a certain movement. Because at that point, they should be able to learn it once as adults and keep it moving. But there's a big difference between training and coaching and teaching and coaching. And one thing that I know personally that I've done over the past 6 months now is actively seeking coaches.
Yeah.
Which is something I had never done before.
Mm-hmm.
I'd actively sought knowledge.
Right.
I'd actively sought wisdom. I'd actively sought training.
Right.
But I wasn't actively seeking coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a little bit of a block. It was an ego block.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little bit of a pride block.
Yeah.
And I work on it and I'm like, all right, how do I clear this pride block?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not getting everything I need to the heart. Right? I use the blockage kind of metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
If it's blocking, what your heart is supposed to be pumping out, then you got to be realistic and say, what do I need to do to clear that blockage? And with me, it was seeking coaches as opposed to seeking training, seeking knowledge, seeking wisdom. All good things.
Right.
But then the secret sauce on top of that is the right chef. Right? Like it's the right chef. Because you can read every cookbook in the library. You can be in kitchens.
Yeah.
You can study knife skills. But it's invaluable to be on the line with an executive chef over your shoulder even. But it takes a certain amount of understanding that that's what's necessary to take you to the next level if you want to go there. If you don't want to go there, no problem, but the road is going to be nearly impossible or extremely difficult.
Oh, 100%. And I just think about what you're saying between the difference of the contrast between training and coaching. You can be trained based off of words, right? You can read a training manual and learn how to do something, but coaching is more so about maximizing what you learn after you've been trained on how to use it, and so we can look at that from so many different regards, and having a coach really truly pulls the best out of you. And that's what I say about, as a trainer. I'm also a wellness coach. I coach people on their lifestyle choices, their behavior patterns, behavior change, right? Different ways, their emotional hurdles and challenges that are in the way that are affecting their health. And so that's more of the coaching aspect, right? Outside of just nutrition and fitness. Now let's look at, how are you driving your vehicle? I know you want to change your car. I know you want to clean your car. I know you want to fix your car. But how are we currently driving it? Like, what are you doing that's got it to this current position? Because we're going to have to make those changes. All right. And so that's one aspect of the coaching, but it's all about bringing the best out of people. It's not to say that you can't. It's just to say that, hey, there's some things that you're not seeing that are in the way, that are hindrances. I can see them a little bit better. So now let me help you remove these hindrances. Let me help you unshackle some of these chains and take some of these weights out of your hands that are holding you back, that you might just need a little bit of assistance with, right? So now that you can move a lot faster, you're the athlete, you're the driver. but let me help you maximize your ability to perform and be the best driver and the best athlete that you've been gifted with doing, right? That's what I'm here for.
Yep.
And to your point about the metaphor of the guy that was crawling, that's exactly what I was thinking about when you were telling that story. That little kid, he was going, he's like, come on, man, you can do it. You got more in there.
Yep.
And I've been in that position before where you think you don't have it, but you're inspired. Like words hold magnetic charge or energy, right? And when we share those words, it's powerful. And then it blows my mind when I think about music and the fact that we can hear music and it can move our spirit emotionally, and people can come to tears, whether through tears of joy or tears of sadness. Either way, the fact that just music and words and melody can evoke that reaction out of the human body and the mind and the spirit, it can move our spirit. It just shows you the power of words. And so when you're sitting there and you're having someone just breathe life into you, when you don't think you can do as much or you can do more than what you've been doing, right? Sometimes you just need to hear it. And a lot of times what you're hearing and what is in that environment of, I guess, preventing the expression of the untapped potential, I think might be thoughts of fear, might be thoughts of doubt, might be thoughts of, I don't know if I can do this, right? Because we're listening to something. And I guarantee that if we're listening to that voice of opportunity, that voice of potential, that voice of courage, that voice of you can do it, right? That will combat those voices of fear, doubt. I bet that guy was crawling thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I don't have enough wind. But it takes somebody who sees what you have left that we can't see to say, no, you can. Keep going. You can do more weight, right? When we used to hit the weights, put more weight on the bar. You can do more. I can tell based on how you're fatiguing, you got more in the tank, right? But in your mind, based on what you've seen from you and anything else, you might feel like, I don't know. Right? Sometimes it just takes somebody else who sees a little bit more in you to pull it out. So this is definitely a big deal to have a coach and someone to lead you. But that brings me to the other thought of you have to see it to be it. You know what I mean? And a lot of times we might underestimate the fact of if we have not seen the max capacity, even above and beyond what we think our max capacity is, it's hard to attach and associate a strong belief system to it. You almost have to have that's why a lot of people who have achieved great things speak back to people who are looking to achieve great things, and they say you almost have to have a certain type of delusional quality about you, because you're almost in the position to where if your potential you feel is greater than what you've seen in your household or what you've seen in your closest influences or what you've seen in your friend groups coming up or what you've seen on TV, if you feel like your potential is greater than what you've seen, then you may not be able to have a realistic approach to your life and actually think you're going to maximize it, because you've only seen so much. It's like the guy who ran that mile story, right? The first time he ran it in 4 minutes or whatever, sub 5 minute mile. Next thing you know, everybody was now inspired, like, oh, I think I could do that.
Possible.
He did it. It's possible.
Yep. It's possible.
I can do it now. Let me go train to do it. But before that, the same people who could have done it and trained to do it, what stopped them from doing it?
Right.
What stopped them from doing it? It's like the fishbowl metaphor, right? You know, whatever it is. I don't know how true it is, but say you put a fish in a certain size fishbowl, it'll only grow to the capacity of that bowl. Right. Now, however true that is, it's just the philosophy of like, hey, you won't outgrow your environment, you know? And so it's just understanding that you have to also have a good awareness on your intuition and what you know you want for you. And at the end of the day, that's why it's a lot of information these days about healthy selfishness. And they're saying that there's a certain degree of being selfish that's actually really healthy, right? Because you're attuned to what your needs are. Right. And if you put your needs to the side to a certain degree, then you're not only doing yourself a disservice, you're also doing others a disservice. So at some point in time, you do have to be a little bit selfish and understand like, hey, what do I want for me out of this life? And if I'm not in alignment of that, who am I living for and why? And are they getting the best of me? And is the impact that I'm making in everybody else's life the best impact I can be making based on where I'm at. Or if I elevate, will I also elevate everybody else that's attached to me? And so it's super important to understand like who we are, how big we can get, and don't be hindered by what we've seen coming up,
Yep.
what our parents have told us, what the environment has told us.
Yeah.
Those things all present noise.
Sure.
They almost
Sure.
act as a music, right? And we're going to respond to whatever frequency or sound is playing. And so we also sometimes need that coach, or we need to coach ourselves on how to speak to ourselves, right?
Yep.
On how to remove that doubt, right? How to build that confidence back up so that we can feel convicted and certain
Yeah.
about going and taking what we feel like is ours.
And to that point also, where you're saying like taking dominion, but also what the environment has shown us.
For sure.
Right. So it's the environment shows us what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if that's something that we can do our best to say, what environments am I putting myself in? And am I exposing myself to environments of abundance? Right. And that's what we can do once we become of a certain age. Unfortunately, a lot of our mind and our mindset is molded when we're younger.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be in environments that are not allowing them to dream,
Mm-hmm.
not allowing them to see more, not allowing them to understand these things.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I personally look back on when I was younger, when I was a kid, was not dreaming.
Not dreaming, yeah, for sure.
Not dreaming. And there's a lot of kids that go through situations and they stop dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
If someone would ever say to me, "Hey, you're a dreamer," I would take that as a massive compliment, because it means you're thinking big. You're saying, what about this? What about this? And how about we go here? And how about we go there? And I think dreams have been extinguished before they've been allowed to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think environments can do that. I think people can do it. Sometimes, the vast majority of the time, unintentionally, sometimes intentionally, but I think a lot of times unintentionally. What ends up happening is that if you have people that don't dream,
Mm-hmm.
haven't dreamed, never fulfilled their dreams,
Right.
when presented with dreams, can unintentionally pull out a fire extinguisher. And it could just be with their energy, with a look, with a critique, as they, well, I'm just telling you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying. Don't go taking it personal. I'm just saying.
Right.
But what they're doing is they're unintentionally or intentionally putting a fire extinguisher to those dreams. And what can happen is that if we've had our dreams hit with a fire extinguisher
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, it's very hard to reignite them. It is extremely challenging. So we need to go to places that have people that live burning full of dreams. And that person, that personality, that energy is becoming so rare that we need to do our best to get in front of those examples as much as possible.
Oh, yeah.
And if we do that, then we can develop a healthy self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you were saying before about healthy selfishness,
Right.
I'm like, perfect. You know what? Okay, this is how I think we should frame it: self-interest.
For sure.
If a person is invited somewhere, it's okay to say no, going to certain places, being around certain people.
Right.
What is it that they want to do? Is it in my interest?
For sure.
If it's not in my interest to do it, I'm not interested in going.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple.
Right.
And I think it's more than fair, more than healthy for a person to have a healthy decision-making prowess on what's in their self-interest.
For sure.
And not consider it selfish, as long as what they're doing is in the service of themselves.
Right.
Right? We want to be in the service of others.
Right.
But not at the sacrifice of the service of ourselves.
Big time.
Because then at that point, it's the old, put on your mask first when you're on a plane. Then you're dead and you can't serve anybody else.
Right.
Right?
For sure.
And if your spirit is dead, if your dreams are dead,
Big time.
if your energy is dead,
Yep.
if your wisdom is dead,
Yep.
It doesn't matter how many people could have been served based on what you could have served up, but you can't because you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So
For sure.
How do we serve ourselves first? Get some nutrition that we need, fuel ourselves, fuel our body, do what's in our best, what's in our self-interest in order to serve our families, in order to serve those within our dominion of our kingdom, right? And And only when we do that and put ourselves in a healthy position can we be more prepared
Mm-hmm.
to use our gift in service.
Big time. Big time. The dreaming, you brought up something to me. It's just about, I think about some of the kids who parents are a lot of times taking that approach now, right? Because we're looking at more of a retrospective type of perception on it. We're like, all right, well, we want to set you up for success and put you into the economy and make you be as successful as possible and teach you how to fend it for yourself in the economy, right? Because this is the environment, the jungle that I have just brought you in. So let me help you out the best we can. And so sometimes I think the hindrance of dreaming is unintentional. It's coming from a loving place, so to speak, right? It's coming from love. They want to still prepare you. They don't want you to get lost in the sauce, right?
Yep.
But it's important to cultivate those dreams, but also understand how to direct the thought process of the child that is dreaming, so that they can also understand how to use that as a tool and not also a weapon against themselves. Because just like anything, if you hold a weapon, it depends on who's holding it. Right? It could be used for good, it can be used for bad. So I think that we're all gifted with these things. And even just saying that, you think like gift and a curse, right? Everything that we're blessed with also comes with an equal and opposite, right, type of energy. And so I think that's where it's important to dream, but then also understand what's going to come with it, right? What are some of those areas that you're going to have to leverage on how to strengthen and be aware of? Because if you're a critical thinker, if you're always thinking, right, it's going to create an anxious mind, right? If you don't know how to use or control that level of anxiety, then it also become distracting, right? You might not be able to focus on stuff. But to everyone who has a gift, they also has a curse. And a lot of times we're in the environment, in the world, that we just look straight at the results of the beautiful things, you see? Yep. And then we start to identify ourselves with just those components on the other side of the coin. Like, hey, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not that. And what we just kind of get fixated on that, right? Right. Versus saying, okay, well, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not that, but why? Why am I not these things, right? What about me that I am is now directly related to what I'm not. And so when we're talking about dreaming and we're talking about identifying what the appropriate, like, imaginative inspirations should be, we might want to also look at some of those areas in our life that we have always attributed to being non-helpful or non-essential or hindering, right, or negative. If we can't always identify what we should be doing, the purpose in the dream, maybe we can look at what we're not and where we have some of those challenges, and then figure out, okay, well, why am I like this? You see? And then sometimes if we can identify, all right, well, I have this anxious mind, or I have this, or I like to do this, I like to do that, might be because I have a strength over here. You feel me? Yeah. And so then it might highlight a different area where we can focus on to get better and better and better.
That's an interesting, and as you were saying, the
it's an interesting play, yeah.
It's strength and weakness, right? Yeah. This sort of, if you have this gift or this strength in one category, could it mean you have a weakness in the opposite side of it? And then it's the old conversation to say, so there's two schools of thought. Right. One is go all in on your strengths.
Right.
Don't worry about your weaknesses. And then there's the other school of thought, which is work on your weaknesses. Right. And where you put your energy. And as you were saying that, it had me thinking about something else. And it had me, it had me say, when can you determine whether a weakness is a liability? That's an interesting way to look at it, right? So it's like, okay, go all in on your strengths. Put some work into your weaknesses, put more work into your strengths, but only if your weakness is a liability. Right. So it's, but if you can determine that this weakness is a liability to your strengths, then put some energy into it.
For sure.
But if it's just a weakness, don't worry about it. If you're an offensive lineman and you can't run a 4.40, it doesn't matter. Is it a weakness? Yes. Your speed is a weakness. Is it a liability to what your job is? No. Right. Because you don't need to run a 4.40 as an offensive lineman.
Right.
So it's a weakness, but not a liability. Now, if you're a linebacker and you're running, a 6 second or something, whatever, however you might look at that as a slower time,
For sure.
it's a weakness, but in your position, it's a liability.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we look at our strengths, continue to pump energy into our strengths, identify our weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
and then figure out which of our weaknesses are liabilities and put energy into them? So, for example, if we were to look from a business context,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people in the business world that want to be entrepreneurs or want to have more financial freedom, want to determine their path a little differently, and one of their weaknesses is negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
One of their weaknesses is reading financial statements,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, if your strength is, being a chef, but now you also want to own a business, you have to look at whether your weakness is going to become a liability. Because if you want to open a restaurant, because you know that your strength is being a chef and you know how to build out a restaurant, but one of your weaknesses is reading financial statements, it can be a liability because you can't run that restaurant successfully if you can't read financial statements.
Big time.
So now you have to say to yourself, no, but I'm just going to go in on my strengths. You know what? I'm just going to build out the restaurant. I'm going to go in on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get other people because I'm going to outsource my weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, sounds great. We all can agree with that.
Right.
Let's outsource the capacity of our weaknesses. But if our weaknesses are in the bigger picture a liability to what we're trying to build, then we do need to give some attention to our weaknesses.
For sure.
So that we can get to the point where they're not a liability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's within our life. I think if a person's in the gym, right, they say, okay, well, this might not be my strength.
Right.
But is not having strong calves actually a liability?
Facts.
To me getting my squat up, right? But they're like, well, what would the calf have to do with it? It actually ends up being a liability to your squat, even though you're just thinking to yourself, well, that's not one of my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I just have small calves. Understand it can be a weakness, but right now, if you're not even giving it some attention, it's going to end up being a liability.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very interesting metaphor of identifying strengths and weaknesses. It's kind of like being on a job interview, like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
Right.
But being able to look at those and saying, okay, but what could be potentially the liabilities in those weaknesses? And I think it's very, very hard to look in the mirror and be able to do that, which goes back to having coaches around us.
For sure.
That can help us identify our strengths, our weaknesses, and our liabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's extremely important to be able to breathe into us,
mm-hmm.
our strengths,
right.
Breathe into us potential, breathe into us what they see our capabilities are that we might not see,
mm-hmm.
be able to identify the weaknesses, and then give attention to those that could potentially be a liability, right? Because if we're working together and you know that I have an elbow that
mm-hmm.
could be a liability, though that elbow could be a liability to all the other work,
mm-hmm.
the chest work, the shoulder work, to arm work, because of the liability in the elbow. And I think it's a very interesting metaphor of getting the right coaches around us that can help us critique, identify strengths, weaknesses, and liabilities. And I never thought of the word liabilities till just now. But it's a very interesting framework to put attention into. If you want to run a restaurant and you don't know how to, at least analyze financial statements, it doesn't matter how good of a restaurant you can run and open. By you not being able to do that, it will be a liability in the long run. And if you give that to someone else, you run the risk of them not having, or them not doing the job done that you need done. And that's something that you have to focus on.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of complexity there. It's definitely, it's a hell of a can to open. You know what I mean? And that's I kind of like where it's going, because I think we're getting to something, because you have strengths and weaknesses, and we talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, one way to identify what you want is by having a better understanding about what you don't want. one way to know what you like is by having a better understanding on what you don't like, right? Now, when you know what you don't like, now is that going to actually like show you what you like? No, it's not going to show you what you like, but it's going to remove a lot of those options that might be distracting our decision-making process.
Yeah.
The more you know, like, I don't like that, now you're filtering and you're dialing it down to where now, okay, you have more options that are in line to the right answer. You know, and so I think about these personality assessments that we take on the professional level, right? I know you probably taken them plenty.
Yep.
I know I've taken them, and a lot of times what they do is they go through and they highlight a chart.
Yep.
And it's showing you strengths and weaknesses. Then you sit next to the next person, they have their chart. The next person got their chart, and you have 100 people in the room, and everybody's chart is going to look relatively. It's going to vary across the board, right? Everybody's going to have different charts, and the chart is showing you, hey, this type of person you are. Right? This is what you're going to find yourself naturally, smoothly gifted at, interested in, right? You're going to be pretty good at this. This is why you tick like this. This is why you like this. This is why you talk like this. This is why you communicate this way, right? These are good things. This is what's going to result out of you being this way. These are the good benefits, right? Awesome. You're going to be a driver. You're going to be a leader. You're going to be a self-starter. You're going to take crazy initiative. You're going to take many risks, right? Then they show you the other side. That says, hey, but these are also going to be the effects of being the way that you are. You may come across a certain way, right? You may have a hard time being empathetic. You may have a hard time. You may cut too quickly before you measure, right? So they just show you a whole different contrast that is still attributed to you being a great human. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of times, the liability helps us now identify how to look at those weaknesses, right? Because first you just say weaknesses, and it's like, yeah, I need to strengthen them. Okay, I don't want to ignore them, right? But how do I decide which ones need to be strengthened or which ones are just a byproduct of the talent that I wield? Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And it's kind of like Michael Jordan, right? He wasn't the best coach of players, but he was an outstanding player and personal coach of himself because he just was able to fixate on a mission and relentlessly, unyieldingly put all the discipline and sacrifice behind to achieve that mission as a leader, right? He's out on the front line, okay? He's yielding the sword. But then you got the general in the back. But we got to understand where we're best suited.
Yep.
You know, you have a lot of leaders in the workplace right now who are very compassionate, who are very understanding, who have a good way to be empathetic with their team that they're advising, and they have great emotional and interpersonal relationships and stuff like that. However, the initiative side of things, the productivity, the urgency on the side of things, right? It may be a looseness there that prevents them from actually operating as direct and as urgent as they could. You see what I mean?
Yep.
So then maybe this person may say, hey, well, based on what I feel the best at and what I'm great at, I should go and be a consultant. I could be a coach. I can move over and into something else, right? Into therapy, something to where that compassion and empathy is magnified as the primary benefit of the role, right? Versus being in this role that's going to require you to be more of a driver, you to be a little bit less empathetic, more more assertive.
Yep.
You see what I mean? And so we kind of get to that position where we're trying to figure out overall, okay, well, how do I maximize my potential next? Not really based on where I'm at, because if I was fulfilled where I'm at, I wouldn't really be prompted with the question of how do I get and obtain more, because you feel like you've checked the box. But if the question is, where do I want to go next, right? How do I evolve next? Then we can kind of take that same approach from your point and identifying, okay, well, what are some of the certain areas in my life that I have underdeveloped and I've always allowed to be underdeveloped up until this point? Maybe that is not saying that I need to remove these things or this is not a reflection that this is bad for me. This might, me trying to go against the grain and resist these behaviors might actually be going against my true nature of where I should be going, right? So instead of trying to say, I need to learn how to be a better driver and I need to learn how to just be, more direct, right? You may need to for that role, But if that role is not fulfilling and you feel like you need to do something else with your life next, and maybe identify, okay, well, there's some reason why I haven't really been able to adopt or incorporate these behaviors, right? Maybe because I'm not that. And then once we can release what we're not, because we're not trying to live up to a certain identity of a position, now we can really embrace and enjoy, right, and evolve what we are. Because sometimes the current position that you're in or the direction you're going in life, what you really are may not be welcome. You see, I've been around a lot of corporate environments to where we're at the national sales meetings and we're doing these different corporate events. I see a different side of James, John, Tim, and Brenda. You know, they act real different. They come a little unhinged, right? You see there more personality on the behind the scenes. And it would be amazing if at the end of the day, our professional achievements in our careers was actually fulfilling and sustaining. And when we're in that rocking chair as old men. But unfortunately, it's not always like that.
Yep.
Right. And so at some point in time, we get to the point to where how can I get more out of this life? And I think we have to align ourselves more with that true nature of who we are. And that's having a good grasp on understanding our strengths and our weaknesses. Why some weaknesses have just been what they are because of the animal that we are. You know what I mean? Certain animals don't climb trees well. You know, certain animals don't fly. It just is the way that it is. You know what I mean? And then we can just adjust and say, okay, well, some of these things are liabilities. They're not welcome in my life. But some of these things are also just highlighting what I shouldn't be doing in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It might help you push you to do something that you should be doing.
And sometimes we need to look in the mirror, like you said, and even from the business side, could be those business disc profile or Myers-Briggs. And as you were saying that, it also made me think about what we talked about earlier, which was I'm getting personal blood work done.
Boom.
Right? The same exact metaphor, right? Because I need to understand based on my blood, what do I need to do to optimize my potential based on my blood?
Facts.
And the exact same thing could be thought of with Myers-Briggs from the professional, actually, even more so not more so, but Myers-Briggs on the personal level also. Or introvert, extrovert, from an, who you get along with most, who you're most compatible with,
for sure,
with nothing against you or the other person, or even Enneagram and all that stuff, disc profile. There are interesting things there.
Right.
Is it malleable? Yes. Is it definite? No. It is malleable to a point of being able to adjust it and then having the capability of realizing, wow, this is really interesting when I'm able to analyze what type of vehicle I am. Now, if I'm this 4-wheel drive lifted truck and I want to go into this other environment, I have to adjust to the environment.
For sure.
I can't be this lifted 4-wheeler truck, blasting music and go into this environment if I want to survive in that environment. Then that's my fault. That's my fault. Because you could go to that environment, but you have to understand what you're getting yourself into based on who you are.
For sure.
And then if you can identify that and make adjustments and say, okay, I understand that. And then that's when there's one word that's in the Bible that I love, which is the word shrewd and cunning. Right? Yeah. People get a little afraid when they hear that. They think the person's going to go real Machiavelli on them.
Yeah.
No. In the Bible it says, "Be as peaceful as a dove and as shrewd as a serpent." Right? Like you need to understand that. Being shrewd is understanding and looking what you need to do in order to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. Now, if what you're trying to achieve is the right thing, is in service of others, and is within building the dominion and providing for your family, it's this shrewd word that is, how do I identify who I am? But be able to maybe maneuver situations that I'm in based on that. That's what I like the word shrewd. If you want to be in the business world, you need to be shrewd. And the act of being ready to be shrewd could be cunning.
Right.
Here are 3 steps along the way in doing this business deal that I already thought of. Wow, that's a pretty cunning move. It doesn't mean that you're not being trustworthy in those people that you're doing business with, but trust but verify. One famous line by Ronald Reagan: trust but verify. A lot of business people will swear by that. So I think part of it is us not living in a fantasy world, that we don't also live around serpents and snakes. And now, how do we identify who we are, be able to maximize that as much as possible, be able to identify what environments are good for us or bad for us, what people we work better with and other people we don't, and then how do we make the adjustment with a humble hat if it is an environment that we want to work in, if they are people that we want to work with. A certain amount of that is a certain amount of understanding and humbleness within the scale of the consciousness scale that we all share back and forth.
Oh yeah.
One of the highest ones above neutrality is understanding. Right before you get to love and joy and peace and enlightenment, there's neutrality and then there's understanding. And it's like, all right, I understand.
Right.
I understand this is the way the person is. I understand this is the way I am.
Acceptance almost.
Exactly. And if you can get to that point, it's higher than being neutral. That's almost being apathetic. Like, whatever happens.
Right.
That's being apathetic.
Right.
Oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. Oh, was it? Okay, no problem. Maybe it wasn't, or maybe there weren't the right moves in place beforehand, that you weren't being cunning enough.
Big time.
To be able to say, okay, now it happened, and you're playing checkers and they're playing chess. No problem. But if you can be accepting of those around you and just say, all right, this is the situation that I'm in. How do I maneuver in this environment based on who I know who I am? Know thyself.
Yep.
Right. And then being able to accept it and work in that environment can get you to a better level of who you are from an authenticity perspective. Still be that truck.
Yep.
But understand, if you're trying to ride through a garden, you probably should turn off your 4-wheel drive capability, right?
Right.
You know, there's little things that it's not about losing authenticity. It's about understanding and deciding what the outcome that you'd like to get is.
Big time.
And you can reverse engineer that with the self-development work, with the self-identity work, with being able to find the understanding. What was the other word that you just used? When I said understanding, and it was acceptance. Acceptance. Exactly. Accepting that. Accepting that's the environment. You know, that's the environment.
Yep.
Accepting it. If you don't like loud crowds, you accept the environment that going to a sporting event comes with, you know, drunken tailgaters, comes with a 2-hour commute home.
Yep. Yep.
That is it.
Yep.
Now, if that's an environment you don't want to put yourself in, no problem. But you have to accept that that's what comes along with it.
Yep.
And if you don't, that's your fault for not living in acceptance of environments and of people, and not being at the point of saying, well, this is where I'm putting myself in, or this is the animal I am, and everything and everyone has to, you know, adjust to me. Again, now that then goes on the spectrum of pride and arrogance versus, you know, understanding and humility. So it's just a spectrum. And the more we can be understanding, it is possible for us to live in understanding and humility while not going to the path of pride and arrogance, that the best possible outcome can happen. Will it always happen? Absolutely not. Will better outcomes happen? Absolutely. There's going to be times. There's a great pastor who gave up, got his name on the top of my head, but, you know, he was explaining about living life with an open hand.
Yeah.
Right. And there are times where when we pray, if we pray for safety, we're thankful for what we have, and we're praying for this abundant life, right? Positive affirmations, telling the universe what we want.
Yep.
And he had a very different place, like, comma, if there's something better, surprise me. And I thought,
I like that. I like that. Don't get me now.
There we go. Hey, is there something better? Surprise me.
Know what I know.
Right. But if you're asking for this, it could be something even better on.
That's true.
So it is such an interesting perspective, because sometimes we ask for something, and then what it was that we wanted slips out of our hands. What it was that we wanted just goes through our fingertips, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I didn't want you to have that.
Right.
I got something better. I got something better.
We get so fixated on not losing what
you
we
keep
thought.
asking me for this, but the thing is that you're not asking for the big thing.
It's almost like dream bigger.
Right. Because you're asking for something. So the way he framed it, he's like, if you would, do this, and you know what, if there's something better, surprise me. And I thought that was an interesting thought and the way he framed it, right? So that kind of wraps everything together of, the understanding, acceptance, being able to look in the mirror and feedback on Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, disc profile, blood work, then taking that and being able to figure out, now going back to how we started the whole conversation, back around to how do we fulfill our potential. And now we can go back and then see where we are. How do we get the right skills that we need to fulfill? And part of that is also know thyself. And every religious text in the world has some version of that, of knowing who you are. That's where it starts. And a lot of the development is looking in the mirror and knowing who you are, and then identifying that the world doesn't have to adjust to you.
Facts.
At the same time, you can remain authentic to who you are. And there are times where you do need to push through.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, well, no, there's a block here. Right. And God's looking at you like it's a 1 foot hurdle. Step over it. Right. So how many people are stopping at blocks that are just meant to be jumped over, that are just meant to be knocked down?
Facts.
That are just meant to be pushed aside. Right. I don't know. But if we can say to ourselves, all right, did we really hit a wall? Or was there a smoke screen that kept us from going through? And the fact of the matter is it was just smoke. It was just smoke. You had to go through it. And in order to go through it, then all of a sudden the sunshine was on the other end. And there's a lot of lessons there, starting with know thyself, accepting people for who they are, identifying that doing things in self-interest is fine. If what you're doing is in the best interest for you to put your mask on, to have oxygen, to be able to serve others, to be able to serve your family. So all of that just kind of culminates into that same idea. Simple, not easy. Simple to think about all of these things, and we can say this and it makes all perfectly logical sense, but then what ends up happening? Emotions get in the way. Right? Emotions get in the way. And that's when pride, envy, jealousy, all of this spectrum of emotions that no one is immune to.
Facts.
No one. I don't care if you're a yogi, if you're this, no one is immune to emotions. Those that can master handling the emotions will be able to leverage it to their success, including fear. Right, including fear. Right, there's a couple great interviews of Mike Tyson. He's like, "Fear is my friend."
Oh yeah,
and you're just like, "Oh shit," bet. You know what I mean? Like, all right, cool. But he's able to take that emotion and make it a battery. Put it in. All right, cool. I'm gonna take this. And it's a battery pack. You're like, man, how's this person have so much energy? Why? Because they're taking those emotions, they're bottling them up, and they're putting them in energy battery packs, and then putting them in and like, let's go. Versus allowing that emotion to drain their other batteries. They're like, oh, energy's energy. Energy's energy. Great, I'm going to take this energy and I'm going to put it in my tank and we're going to go. So, ready?
Oh, yeah. That was good, man.
That was real good.
Yes, sir.